The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. My name is Mike Bradinsky. This is the episode for December 7, 2017. On my right, the one and only incredible editor of the Record Journal, Ralph Tomaselli. Also on my right, special guest in the studio, Craig Fishbein, Republican Town Councilor and Republican State Rep representing the mighty 90th General Assembly District. Craig, thanks for coming on the show again.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Last time was, I think it was in April 2017. It was fun. And we got some meaty stuff again. We try to keep our agenda meaty. But, Ralph, there's this old expression, absence makes the heart grow fonder. This pertains to you. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I think absence and the word abstinence, maybe they're somehow related. We have not heard from Ralph Tomaselli's story of the week. I don't know if we have a drum roll. I forgot to tip Bruce off. We do. It's ready. Here we go. Give him two. Ralph, you got one drum roll.
I got one. One is enough.
Okay, because you only got one story of the week.
That's right. I only got one story here. And the story is headlined, Deal with Town Slashes BMS Taxes.
Okay.
And the story was authored by Matthew Zabarick. And the story explains that Bristol-Myers Squibb will pay significantly less taxes on their 180 Research Parkway property in the coming year under a new tax appeal settlement between the town and the pharmaceutical company. And the settlement will lower the market value of the property by an average of 42% over 5 years. And of course, that will affect the amount of taxes the town will be able to collect on that property. And I just want one more sentence here from the story, or one more point.
Sure.
Corporation Counsel Janice Small pointed out that the appeal was structured so that Wallingford didn't take what she described as a bigger hit in the first 2 years. And what you need to know about the first 2 years is that the town has already collected that money. So it's a case where the town will not have to give back money.
This story appeared on the front page above the fold. Right. The headline across the.
Yeah,
is it that big a story to you?
I instigated that personally. So
tell me.
I did think it was.
Okay.
Well, first of all, we are trying to put more stories across the fold in general.
Okay.
I think sometimes our front page otherwise looks too equal. I don't think things stand out. And I think because this is the town's largest taxpayer and there are millions of dollars in taxes at stake in the coming years, combined with a very sluggish grand list and reductions in state aid, so that was the thinking on that.
Let's get over to Craig. Craig, you guys discussed this, I guess, in executive session. There was a vote after that to approve the settlement that Ralph just described. Where did you stand on that? What was your thinking?
Well, we met a few times on
Okay.
this in executive session. Janice kept us pretty much up to date on where things were going, and as a good lawyer will do, your pros and cons are given to the client. Ultimately, I voted no. I didn't think that the numbers were good enough, quite frankly. It's a lower tier approach, with a high number the first year, and it's tiered down over 5 years. It's based upon what they're marketing the property for, and the fact that they can't sell it at $50 million. So, you know, one would argue that the taxable value is something less than that. You know, it's an unusual property, but ultimately I just thought that the number was not good enough to settle on.
Well, you were outvoted, I think, 7-1 or 8-1 or something.
Isn't that usually the case?
Yeah, it usually is, actually. We may come back to that in a minute. But if everyone voted the way you voted, what would have happened next?
There more than likely would have been a trial. I mean, of course, you know, Bristol-Myers could have come up with a higher number, but our process is such when two parties have a dispute and they can't resolve it amongst themselves, that a gentleman or lady in a black robe is going to make the decision, and that's a trial. So.
And the issue at the trial would have been, generally speaking, the fair market value of the Bristol-Myers property, and the judge would have to decide that.
Ultimately that. I think with this case there were some other issues, you know, which approach perhaps the court could take in coming to that number.
Similar sales, income, replacement value, depreciation.
Very good.
Those kinds of issues.
And because it's an unusual property, and unusual properties don't have a lot of sales, you have problems with comps. You know, is it replacement value? You know, that kind of stuff.
So I want to get to an example that just using my calculator,
Okay,
as to what this may mean for Wallingford. And it depends upon, the examples depend upon the fiscal year that you're in, because the cost of this settlement to Wallingford depends upon the mill rate. You know, the higher the mill rate, the more dollars are involved. The lower the mill rate, the fewer dollars are involved. And because the mill rates tend to go up as time goes on, the amount of money that Wallingford loses grows. But here's an example. Currently, the mill rate is 28.55. Currently, 28.55. Assuming next year, or the fiscal year that's coming up, the town council will be debating a budget in April, passing it in May. Assuming it goes up just to 29, which is going to be more than that. So, but if it just goes up to 29 mills, if there had been no tax appeal, Wallingford would have gotten, get your pencils out, $2,922,000, I'm rounding a titch.
right.
So, if there is no tax appeal, 29 mills, it would be higher than that, $2,922,000 because of the tax appeal. Instead, Wallingford, based on 29 mills, that's a hypothetical mill rate, is going to get $934,000. It's, again, rounding a titch, it's a loss of about $2 million. And as the mill rate goes up year after year, that grows from 2.1 to 2.3, you know. Let me get back to Craig. Craig, was this settlement a loss for Wallingford? You know, you said you would have voted against it, and you thought the numbers could have been better. Obviously, everyone disagreed with you, but does this rise to the level of being a big loss?
I think it's unquestionably a loss.
And what do you think? What do you think could or should have been the result, if, you know, the way you saw it? I mean, the legal loss.
I'm a fighter, and quite frankly, I would have preferred to see a trial.
Okay.
And let the chips land where they may. I think we had enough information, enough law on our side that I think we would have fared better.
And don't those numbers that you just gave us kind of bear out that a trial might have been?
No.
No.
Not at all. Craig knows, but we don't know. But
Right.
maybe he'll tell us. Craig knows what the appraisals were. And actually, it's not a secret anymore. It's a big secret at the time. But somewhere along the line, Bristol-Myers Squibb had evidence and expert testimony to back up Bristol-Myers' position. After trial, Wallingford could have got hit for worse.
Less than 900,000?
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
the value
No,
could have gone down
that's-
below it, or else I am confident, I mean, Janice Small, the law department, they're capable people, Shelby Jackson, capable people, but a trial's not a foregone conclusion. I mean, I'm sure Bristol Myers had an even lower figure than what was settled on, and if the judge went with Bristol Myers experts, could have been a greater tax loss. Craig?
That's possible because it would have gone from the 121 million that I believe it was the number, the valuation number, to a number around 50. Let's just say that arguably, if a judge found fair market value was 45, it's going to go right from 121 to 45, and you're not going to have that cushion.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what Mike's referring to, and he's correct. But I think the number should be higher. And when we met on this prior to that final meeting, I had expressed that the number should be higher. But.
Okay, so that's in our destiny. Maybe the news of the week was stories, or news of the month, were stories about the Cemetery Association and the infamous Cemetery Association wall. Actually, it's a town wall, but it's near, it envelops the Center Street Cemetery. The Record Journal, I believe, had one editorial and 3 or 4 news stories on this. So I'm sure that our viewers are somewhat familiar with the factual background. Although I think I needed to discuss it, I want to lay out some facts in just a second so everyone's on the same page as where we're coming from, and if I'm missing some, Craig, and you can fill in. But it takes us back to the November 28, 2017 Town Council meeting. There were 2 items on the agenda that impacted the Cemetery Association. I'm going to get to the easier one first, and then it had to do with whether or not the Cemetery Association, which is a private nonprofit organization, it's not the town of Wallingford per se, whether the Cemetery Association should be, I'll use the word awarded, but whether the town and the Cemetery Association should sign another 10-year agreement whereby the Cemetery Association would manage the cemetery. The details of that contract, unless Craig wants to get in there, are sort of beyond the scope of this, but that's a general concept. In the end, the town council, Craig dissenting, voted to go with the Cemetery Association for another 10 years. Craig, you voted no?
I did.
Walk us through that logic that you had.
Well, I first questioned, why do we need this relationship? The agreement called for no responsibility for the cemetery to have anything to do with the wall. Could defer any maintenance of the property to Public Works. So why, other than for the possible burial of bodies, do we need this arrangement? We could just perhaps hire a sexton ourselves and handle it sort of like Park and Rec. So there was one other, the financial component. It was $81,340, I think, was the number, the appropriation for 17-18, and Janice couldn't tell me what that was for specifically. And then it said, that the association would ask of the town in successive years for an appropriation, and if the town didn't meet that requested appropriation, that the association can get out of the deal. It seemed like a one-sided written document, and I just didn't feel that was necessary.
The association needs town money to do what they do. And before I get it over to Ralph, we're catching you cold on this, but you're sort of our man in the street. But let me ask Craig just one more question. So, if the town council rejected the contract, what would have happened? If the town council thought like you thought and voted no, because everyone else was in favor, but you voted no, where would it go?
I don't think it would have had to go anywhere. The agreement that's currently in place that the parties have been operating under has been in place since 1911. As far as I know, it didn't expire. So perhaps the prudent thing would be to do is perhaps look for someone else to provide the services, but it wouldn't mean a stopping of services, unless there's something I don't know.
Well, there's supposed to be an updating of an old contract that had a lot of obsolete language, but...
For over 100 years.
Yeah, just about, yeah, for 100
Okay.
years. You're sort of on the sideline in this, but you sort of heard the overview. What do you think of the Cemetery Association? You have faith and confidence in their ability to...
Well, you know, I have to admit that we did focus on the settlement and did not write about the Cemetery Association, so I'm starting out a little bit behind the curve, behind the 8 ball, so to speak.
Well, maybe I should have started with a threshold question. Craig, do you have faith and confidence in the Cemetery Association to continue on with their duties of managing the cemetery, whether or not with a revised, updated contract, maybe some of the legal particulars you didn't agree with? But I think the concept at the town council meeting was, do you have faith and confidence in the Cemetery Association? Kind of yes or no. And if you go with a yes, the contract was sort of already, as always happens, the contract was already negotiated and the I's dotted and T's crossed.
Well, I guess
faith
you
and
have
confidence there?
I think ultimately I don't, and I think I base that upon apparently the administration doesn't, in that they didn't have faith and confidence for them to maintain the wall. It's expressly
Well, it's a town wall, right.
lifted out of the document. You know.
Well, the town has a public works department, and Cemetery Association doesn't. The town has heavy equipment and laborers and lawnmowers, and they have stuff, and the Cemetery Association would have to acquire that somehow. And
Cemetery Association has
they do have lawnmowers.
And a $20,000 backhoe.
Well, to maintain the wall, you're adding a duty to them, and they would need more money. And on the other hand, if you took the management of the Cemetery Association away, if you took the management of the cemetery away from the association, you have to add it on to a town duty, and that means more tax dollars. So if the town is managing the cemetery, all the things that the volunteers do for free, all the record keeping, the management, the details, town staff would have to do that. That puts pressure on taxes, and I think the argument is, and always is for nonprofits, if you have volunteers doing the work, that's a good deal.
That's assuming that the record keeping is currently done done appropriately and properly. But as far as, the way the agreement is structured, they can have Public Works currently under this agreement mow the lawn.
Yep.
So it's not going to increase the expenditures. So
let's move on here.
Yep, that's fine.
You're ready to move on?
I'm ready to move on.
Also on the agenda for that meeting was the question of repairs to the cemetery wall. And more narrowly, we're going to go into this in a little bit of detail, but some repairs were required by the state of Connecticut because in the course of putting a facility on a Prince Street property, an office and a garage or a storage facility, in the course of completing that project, the town thought it was practical to punch a hole in the cemetery wall so that equipment primarily and people could go from this new facility, which is right outside the cemetery wall. It's right outside, but in order to get to it, to get to the cemetery, you'd have to go out on the street and go all the way around and find an opening somewhere. So it's much more convenient to punch a hole in the wall. The problem came when it came to the state's attention that the town should not have punched a hole in the wall because state money was used. There was a grant involved. And because of that, the state was supposed to approve of whatever was done, especially if there's an adverse impact on a historic structure, and the wall was historic, is on the national list of historic properties. Craig, as a factual matter, I just want to get out some of the facts on that part of it. What do we need to add just on that part that I've got to so far?
I would concur with what you just said.
Okay, so we're there so far. When it came to light that the town punched a hole in the wall, and the state didn't approve of it yet. The state let it be known that there would be consequences. You just can't do that kind of thing and expect there's no consequences. So over a period of months, the town and the state were in some sort of a negotiation, and I'm imagining now, I mean, this is a speculative recreation, it kind of went back and forth, but the job of the law department was to keep the consequences as minimal as possible, as affordable as possible. And what was decided, or the state and the town decided, is a way of slapping the town's wrist, but not so hard that it was punitive, but in a way that the interests of the state were going to be protected, is that the state would require $19,640, not a fine, not a penalty, but in repairs that, after we saw this discussion at the town council, needed to be done anyway. And so I appreciated the editorial that is in the Record Journal that kind of made this. I just want to read this and then get back to Craig, because I'm not sure that's well understood, that the $19,640 should have been spent anyway. These are repairs. This wasn't throwing money away. The town was getting value. Repairs needed to be done. So the Record Journal said this in part: "This is a reasonable settlement in that this historic asset in the center of town will receive $19,640 worth of repairs that doubtless would have to be made sooner or later, which is better than a $19,640 fine, while the decision reinforces the idea that no one, not even town, should be making unauthorized changes to a structure that's protected as a part of our local and state heritage. The Connecticut Environmental Policy Act extends such protection to historical resources by requiring a review process." Bruce, if you could tee up that first video, I think it's called Historic Rules or something. Don't play it just yet. A question has come up in the past. Okay, it's a historic property, you know, it's listed.
Right.
Can the town take it down? Can the town destroy it? Can the town do whatever it wants with it? We came across this question with the American Legion building, if you recall. The American Legion building was on the list of historic properties. And the town, and I think the town council, Craig, before your time, voted to take that building, this historic structure, down. It didn't get any approval from anybody. Right. And the state was involved because they were concerned about preserving the building, and there was a race, literally a race. Right. Did the wrecking ball get to the American Legion before a court order, or did the court order come before the wrecking ball? And there's no question that the mayor had the authority to knock down the American Legion building, even though it was a historic structure. So what happened was the mayor was kind of ready to go with a wrecking ball, and the state called him up and said, "Mayor, you know, we got a court date next week. Could you just hold off for the wrecking ball?" And the mayor did. There was a hearing on a preliminary injunction, and I know because I testified at it, on behalf of preservation. Right. And the judge issued a preliminary injunction. The American Legion building was saved, and we, you know, kind of followed it after that. So this is a similar situation. But Janice Small tried to make that clear in this statement that she made. Let's roll that first video. 3, 2, 1, go.
The position that we can just, if we weren't using state funds, we could just take down the wall with no repercussions.
You would have the right to take it down, and someone would have the right to pursue an action to try to prevent you. That's correct. Federal statute does not bar you from doing what you want with the property.
So,
unless it involves state.
Clear enough?
That is clear.
I think, Craig, any thoughts as far as where we are at this point?
no, interesting.
Yeah, okay. So then the question becomes, if repairs are going to be made, and we know they are, who's going to make them? And do we send that out to bid? And that was really the issue, you know, on the town council agenda. The rules for the town of Wallingford say that things are supposed to go out to bid normally, unless it's in the best interest, and that's the wording, the official wording, the best interest of not going out to bid. And so the town council had to make a decision, waive the bid for this repair work or not. We got a second video, and I just want to show that, which gives some background, and then we'll get it over to Craig and see where he is with this so far. Let's roll that second video, or it's number 1 video, Bruce. 3, 2, 1, hit it. That's
I
it.
needed to have somebody take a look at the wall in terms of what repairs, if any, needed to be done on it. And Epic Masonry was referred to me locally. They're a Wallingford firm. After I had sought another firm, wasn't really interested in the project. And they came out, they're a local company, they came out, they looked at the property, and they told me, and then the state, what types of repairs they felt needed to be made. The state Historic Preservation Office reviewed their credentials and agreed that they were qualified to do the work. I've asked them, because I did not know, I don't know anything about this type of work, so I needed to get an idea of what those things would cost, to see whether or not that was really going to be a viable resolution with the Historic Preservation Office. And so they gave me the quote of $19,640. We're at a point where the State Historic Preservation Office is on board with this as a resolution. The repairs that are going to be made are viewed as being ones that will really protect the life of the wall for the foreseeable future, and I'm recommending that we in fact do this as mitigation for that project. Once this is concluded one way or another, the grant will be closed out, and where the state is holding back $133,000 and change, which if we can resolve this, we'll close all that out. That's kind of where we're at.
More background there. I want to go to Craig and then Ralph. Craig, that didn't persuade you at that point. I know the discussion went on, and we have 2 more clips to show, but...
The issue being whether or not to waive the bid?
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't dissuade me because...
Persuade is what I meant to say. That didn't persuade you.
It didn't persuade me in that now we have a scope of a project. I think it's in the best interest of the taxpayers to find out what others would perhaps bid on that project. It's sort of like, you know, we want to replace the camera in the studios, so, you know, Canon says, I'll give it to you for $5,000, and you just say, okay, $5,000. We don't know what the market would bear from others, and I don't think waiving the bid was appropriate. I have familiarity with the vendor, but that doesn't change the process.
Ralph, there's 2 more videos we got to play. You've seen them, you know, because I sent them to both you guys. But I just wanted to take a pause and see where your thinking is so far, subject to the next 2 videos.
I don't think she's been real persuasive yet.
Okay.
I mean, she called somebody up, they helped her out, and now she wants to give them work because she wants to settle this state problem she has.
She used the term local twice. What's the relevance?
Well, usually that matters a lot. Except usually that matters a lot, except when it's not in fashion and during that particular discussion.
Right.
But usually, if you have someone who's local, you say it's a local business, you know. So it sort of breaks new ground if we say that doesn't matter, I think. But let's go to the next that next video and see if anyone's mind has changed so far. Bruce, 3.
Right.
Why aren't we going out to bid?
I mean,
is it related in somehow as a way to reward the company, and I'm not saying it in a bad way, for the fact that they came in and did this evaluation? Was that part of the overall work? Why would you say I want to use them?
Initially I had some difficulty in finding someone who was going to come out and do an evaluation. I mean, the sample evaluation that the state gave me was like 160 pages long, and I thought, oh my goodness, this evaluation is going to cost me a fortune. And So it took me some time, and this firm was a local firm that was recommended to me. So when they did the evaluation, they did as a benefit to the town. They did not charge me for it. And then in that process of talking to the state, they wanted to see this firm's, when I was giving them the evaluation, they wanted the credentials of this firm that was telling them what they were supposed to be doing. So to me, it just made sense to keep, because the state was on board with it, and they did agree to do the evaluation. It just made sense to me, frankly. I mean, I understand your position. I mean, I do agree with you with respect to, bid waivers in the ordinance. I'm certainly not going to be writing the specs for this type of thing if it went out to bid, and so then I guess I would be paying somebody else to do it. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. I didn't think it was a significant amount of money. I felt that because the state had met them and everything seemed to be doable, that's really what I did.
Just to get it out of town, a suggestion would be to have the state fella come down and take a look at it.
Yeah, I know when they were discussing the process that they were going to be using, they all seemed to be in agreement about that. I'm sorry, I can't describe, so.
Well, no, that's good. That's good. Right. It's just, I would like the state to come down and say, okay, they did it like they said they were going to do,
and
or somebody.
That's one of the reasons why, the fact that, the state did review the credentials of the firm, and we did have the meeting where it was all discussed and everyone seemed to be on the same page. I just thought that was important.
I agree.
Craig.
Yes, sir.
You getting closer to being persuaded now that we've, progressed in the debate at the town council meeting?
No, as I watch it more and more,
okay.
I'm becoming firmly entrenched in my no vote.
Your heels are digging in. Tell us what you're thinking.
Well, I'm just concerned over the wall, ultimately. Is this just a Band-Aid? I mean, because, Janice is saying, well, an evaluation essentially should be done of the wall. We deferred that, and I know this town does not have a great track record with maintaining properties, right? So that's one concern. The other is the procedure all told. I mean, I don't even know that the state did a good job here in negotiating this whole thing, but I'm just not comfortable.
Ralph?
Well, I'll give her credit for this, that she at least answers the question in what I would say is a full way. She acknowledges the question, the concerns, she brings up her point, but she also says, hey, I know where you're coming from. And sometimes the people that are sitting around the mayor, including the mayor, and if we get to the clip, we may get to a clip of the mayor later in the show, where someone asks a reasonable question, and they're made to feel as though they come from Mars for asking the question. So I'll at least give Janet credit for that much.
Getting back to the issue of local versus non-local, around the Brudzinski residence.
Right.
If we need some work done on the house, it matters to me whether the work is going to be done by someone local or not. I mean, money matters. I mean, certainly money matters. But if I can trade locally, I certainly will, because I think someone who is in town or in the immediate area has a stake in their local reputation, and contractors get business from word of mouth. Whereas someone, let's say from Stamford or out of town, if it's a trade that is available, may not have as much interest in pleasing a customer when it's not a word of mouth situation. So I think it's something, but clearly money matters, and in a public entity, when things have to go out to bid,
right.
Unless there's a reason not to go with the low bid, I've just given a perspective on on local versus non-local. Well, great.
Well, the reason why I brought it up is you might recall, I think it was my first term, I brought up to the ordinance committee that perhaps we should have an ordinance that gave preference to local vendors, and that was derailed by the mayor. So now we have a bid waiver.
Because it increased the cost of the town.
Arguably.
Well, he said.
Arguably.
No, that would be the ordinance. That's what the ordinance would say.
Would say what?
Well, if it's within 5% or 10%.
Absolutely.
No, 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 no,
You'd increase
no.
the
The
cost.
way we were structuring this
Yeah.
was that the local could meet the low bid, so it would be of no additional cost to the town. And the mayor was against that.
Yeah.
So now we have Corporation Council, stressing local on a bid waiver.
That's another play for another,
Yeah, no,
another
it
day,
is.
when
No.
we get around to talking
Right.
about
No.
the ordinance committee or some such. What Janice Small has said so far is the state looked at this contractor, the Historic Properties Office, the historic office of the state. They approved, or I would say liked, but if they didn't like, they would have let the town know. They approved the contractor, they approved the specs, they met with the contractor, and everyone was on the same page. So there was no miscommunication about process, how the work was going to be done, and the specs. Janice Small, the law office, is putting some value on that, and apparently John Letourneau did too. I have a couple of guys on my right not impressed by that. We got one more clip.
Well, the only thing
Go ahead.
I'll say just real quickly
Sure.
is, I grew up around construction.
Sure.
And we were asked to look at jobs, and we were asked to give prices. And that did not mean we didn't necessarily get any credit for getting the job, for going out, looking at something. So that's not, I don't think that's the way it works in the private sector, that you get credit from coming out and looking and giving an estimate.
Well, that's one of the threads of Attorney Small.
Yeah, I just don't think she should have brought that one up. That's all. I probably would have.
I think she's being very honest about it.
No, she was.
And I think she was almost duty bound to.
Okay.
And let me just give you my
Right.
my thoughts. When you're sitting in the mayor's office or the law department or any of these departments around town, you got to get business done. And sometimes if you need an assessment, you need somebody to look at something.
Right.
Especially when you're dealing with the state and it's beyond your expertise and it's a state you've got to please. You could have, and maybe the department should have done this, paid $1,000 for an assessment. I think that's your argument.
Right.
Pay for the assessment so that that's erased from the equation, and that way you can say, I didn't get this, evaluation free. I paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the bid then you send it out to bid, and maybe you get a bid of $19,640 plus the $1,000
Right.
you paid, plus the money that you'd have to spend to write specs, and I think that's what Janice Small was saying. Craig, you're bursting there, so I want to get to
Well,
it.
we had the same situation
Yeah.
when with the drawings for the new building. Mr. Lazarus gave a lot of his time. He volunteered his time with regard to the preliminaries. And then the Cemetery Association came before us and they said, Mr. Lazarus has donated his time, therefore we want to waive the bid and give him the project. And the council actually rejected that.
That's right.
First time I've ever seen that happen.
Yeah.
It's sort of exactly the same situation.
Let's get this last video
Yes.
under our belt. That fourth video, Bruce. 3, 2, 1. Go.
Is it fair to say they're fixing the previous repairs?
I don't know that that's fair to say. I think
The sealant has dried and cracked and is no longer serving its purpose. In short, these repairs are failing. So
those, I don't believe that those were part of the last, from Public Works, it's my understanding they don't believe that those were done by the person hired to do the previous repairs. When Henry was there for one of the meetings that we had out there, and he did not believe some of the fixes were done by the person that he had hired. We do need to reach a resolution in terms of the grant. So I appreciate your concerns, but it's keeping the grant open. So that would be my concern. So it was my understanding that at least some of the work that's being repaired through this proposal, I was told had nothing to do with the previous contractor. But
If we don't do this work the way we've got it outlined here, we run the risk of losing the grant. Did I understand that correctly?
yes, I'd have to try to find some other solution, but that would, I mean, worst case scenario, that would be the case, yes.
Even if we got the same exact price, the same exact skill set, or even marginally better, it may cost us X number of dollars trying to get there.
Right.
And we may not save anything. We may end up spending more.
Correct.
So,
So there you go. There's some questions from folks in the audience, but in the end, a vote was taken, and it was 7 in favor of waiving the bid for a company called Epic Masonry that gave the price of $19,400. That came out and gave the assessment free. That was the local contractor.
Right.
And so that the process could be speeded up if you credit. It was pointed out in subsequent debates that there may not have been a hard deadline, or there wasn't a hard deadline to get this done, but that the process had been extended and the state had granted extra time to get this worked out. So the vote was taken, and the bid waiver was passed, and then 3 articles appear in the Record Journal. Got them here. We're going to refer to some of them. Going to refer to. On the 28th, town and state settled dispute on cutting the wall. Actually, that was the day of the town council meeting, I believe.
Right.
So that was to get interest
a preview.
Going. A preview. Go to the town council meeting, and it went over some of the background that we went over here on this show. Just one paragraph, and we'll get to the next article. The Town Center Street Cemetery Association received a $275,000 grant for the garage project through a program sponsored by the Department of Economic and Community Development, and the State Historic Preservation Office is part of that. And so on and so forth, I suppose. Then on the next day, the 29th, the headline, not on the front page. Not on the front page. Wallingford Council approves $19,640 settlement over the wall. So you go down, I don't know, a dozen paragraphs, and Craig Fishbein is quoted, and Craig, I'm going to go to you after I read this. Fishbein alleged the town put a project for cleaning and restoration of the cemetery walls out to bid in 2012 and received submission from 3 companies. However, another company that didn't submit a bid was ultimately selected for the project. Fishbein criticized the bid process and argued the company chosen did not properly maintain the wall, necessitating the present repairs. Is that still you got, evidence for that?
No, I'll back off of the last sentence.
Okay.
I had questioned whether or not that particular entity that was given a portion of this project caused problems which result in these repairs, because as I'm able to ascertain, at least at this point, we have that outfit, which is Performance out of the Bronx, did work on the wall. Public Works did work on the wall, and apparently Mr. Devaney did work on the wall. And then there's another contractor who has yet to be identified.
Going back in time?
Sometime within the last 5 years,
okay,
who did work on the wall. I don't know, but obviously repairs are failing, whether it's a result of bad repairs. I know that the entity that was given the project Performance apparently has no experience with historic walls.
Well, would you allow for the possibility that this is a 300-and-some-year-old wall, and as time goes on, it needs constant repairs in different parts, different areas, walls move and shift, there's weathering, there's aging. Would you allow for the possibility that no one was really negligent, that you could blame, and there's no evidence to that effect, but repairs just need to be made on something like that? Is that a possibility, or you just rule that out?
Well, I know that the state had sent an email to Janice saying that lack of expertise in historic walls led to a portion of the problems here. That's all I can say. Now, does that mean cutting the wall? That somebody didn't know?
So we don't know what it means.
We don't know what it means.
We don't know. No one's pointing the finger at anybody specifically.
No, but part of the problem here is we don't find out about this until a week before the meeting. So, I didn't even know this was coming up. So now we get an agenda and we have an agreement, and I've got to scurry, to get information.
So the next story on November 30.
Right.
Mayor asks for review of contract on cemetery. There's a couple things I want to read. I'm going to break it down and then go to Craig and then Ralph to you. Second paragraph, Fishbein raised concerns over a project the town awarded to a company in 2012 to clean and restore the walls, saying that the town didn't follow the process as required by ordinance. The town put the project out to bid. Fishbein said and received proposals from 3 vendors. Fishbein claimed the town ultimately did not choose any of the 3 and instead chose a different vendor, Perfection Construction Management, a company in the Bronx, New York. Let me just stop there and give some quick background here. In 2011, before this story broke, the town was looking for masonry services, and it went out to bid, and under the auspices of the Board of Education. Don't read anything into that because they have a lot of buildings and grounds, and any department, any agency can use
Right.
the bid. And this was an hourly bid, and the low bidder on, and there's a point to all this, I'm going to tie this up. The low bidder on that 2011 bid for masonry services for a mason was $40 an hour. The next lowest was $44 an hour. This is a 3-year weighted average because it's a 3-year bid, and not on any specific project. It's for masonry services.
Okay.
So the low bidder was $40. The next lowest bidder was $44. The next bidder was $90, and the next bidder was $122 per hour. And that's just for the mason. If you have a mason's helper and
Right.
things like that, it's lower than that. So the town had out to bid and did award the lowest bidder, because you guys a second ago were saying lowest bidder, lowest bidder, lowest
Right.
bidder, right?
Right.
You were saying that, and and so
Right.
we get the lowest bidder here, and I just want you to be accountable for your view.
Right.
Okay. So the town had that bid, I'm going to say, my editorial view, in its pocket. It could fall back on this. Then in 2012, there was a perceived need. There was a need to do repairs to the cemetery wall. We all know the cemetery wall needed repairs, and it went out to bid for cemetery wall repairs, a much more specialized and specific bid. The bids came back. Low bidder, $62,000. Next was $97,979, and the highest bid, $235,200. Editorial view: if I'm a purchasing agent, if I'm Henry McCulley, who assumed responsibility, for this bid, and I see a spread of between $62,000 and $235,000, I wonder about it.
Right.
And one of the tools, I wonder if everyone got it. I wonder if the low bid is going to short me on quality or even the extent of the work. I wonder about stuff. And so one of the tools that the purchasing department has is they can reject all bids. That is very clear. It's very specific in the ordinances. They can reject everything. They don't have to take the low bidder that you would want them to take. And so that's what they did, is they rejected Monument Conservation Collaborative out of Norfolk, who had the $62,000 bid, and gave it to the earlier $2011 bid, which was the hourly basis bid. That's what happened. Craig, let's go back to you. Were you criticizing the process because you were under the impression that the people that did the work had no bid whatsoever? The people that that did the repairs in 2013, whatever it was?
Performance out of the Bronx had no bid. They certainly did not specifically bid this project.
Yeah, they got the bid under the masonry under the masonry services in 2011.
For the Board of
We agree
Ed.
on that.
Yeah.
Well, not just for the Board of Ed. Any town department could use that bid. So I don't want to slur or diminish that bid by saying, well, the Board of Ed was the overall sponsor, but any town department could use that.
As long as the specifications of the bidding document were the same, sure.
So you're saying that, I think what you're saying is the town violated the purchasing statutes by giving it to Perfection, who won the bid in 2011 for general masonry services.
That is my position.
And the purchasing agent probably has a different opinion.
Okay,
As
well-
long as the bid was there and for masonry services, he could do it. And that's the divide between the two of you?
Certainly, in that,
Okay. I just wanted to get to the nub of
in
it.
that the subsequent bid for the
Yeah.
specifically for the cemetery, required the bidders, it says vendor must have completed at least 3 projects similar in size and scope within the last 5 years. That was not a requirement of the Bronx outfit when they bid on that original project. Additionally,
Well, there was no project. Monument Conservative Collaborative.
bid under these specifications.
Yeah, they bid under those specifications. I'm sorry. But Perfection Construction, who got the bid in 2011 because they had the lowest bid,
Were not required
they
to...
weren't required to.
That is correct.
That's right.
But
They
it was
were- they
awarded
were
to them.
required.
Also, they were required under the new bid.
But I just want to get to the language of the purchasing ordinance that you says makes it illegal for the low bidder under a masonry
It's a totally
services
different
contract
project.
to do the work.
It's a totally different project and totally different specifications, totally different qualifications.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's basically it. I mean,
Okay.
this, for the cemetery, says the work has to be done by hand, for instance.
But wait, that's not the question. Those bids were rejected. The by hand specific, those are rejected, which the purchasing agent absolutely had a right to reject. The question that you're raising is, I think, it's illegal for the town to award repairs to the cemetery wall under a masonry services contract that was duly awarded pursuant to competitive bid. You said your position is they can't do it, I think, right?
That is my position.
I just wanted to know that.
And I think it will bear out that the town using or awarding it to the Bronx outfit actually cost the town more than the $62,000.
Well, that's a homework assignment for someone else. I mean,
Well, that's the
want to take
concern.
that on.
It's taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, if they want to take on that homework assignment. So going down in that article on the 30th, it says Fishbein said he reached out to several law enforcement agencies this week to investigate the matter, including the FBI's Municipal Fraud Unit, the Attorney General's Office, and the Office of the Chief State's Attorney, but none of those offices have jurisdiction over the matter. So I assume in the course of your investigation you found evidence of illegal activity or criminal activity?
No, nor did I say that.
Okay.
So the FBI has a municipal fraud unit, and
Yeah.
I think it was reported in the Record Journal a few weeks ago that that unit is investigating the awarding of a contract in Meriden.
Well, that's based on Meriden facts and circumstances. I just wanted to find out from you whether in the course of your Freedom of Information requests, which are reported, in the course of your interviewing town officials, whether you did or not, you had anything, there was any beef there, any facts there that would warrant a call to the FBI, the Attorney General, or the state's attorney?
Oh, certainly.
What were the facts?
Well, certainly if a municipality puts an item out to bid and does not award that project to the lowest bidder, but to one who
Had a prior bid,
had a prior bid and
although
is-
more general.
and perhaps, well, definitely not the same specifications, that's a level of favoritism, in my opinion.
Okay, that's what it was. That's the basis of the calls and the
Sure.
I'm just got to clarify.
Sure.
That's why I'm asking.
So,
I'm not arguing the point. I just want to make sure.
My discussion with
Yeah.
the municipal fraud unit, who appears to have some level of jurisdiction in these areas,
Okay.
Sent me to the Attorney General's office, and I had a discussion with them, and they indicated that they did not have jurisdiction over it. I never had a discussion with the Chief State's Attorney's office because of my discussions with the Attorney General's office. It was agreed that there is no crime where the Chief State's Attorney's office would have jurisdiction. So.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking you is not to start an argument with you, but to make sure I wasn't missing a fact that you had, not speculation, not questions, that we didn't have. But it looks like we're on the same page. The concern you have, we've discussed thoroughly, whether or not that 2011 bid was good enough to cover the cemetery wall. That's the issue.
And at this point, I'm still in fact-finding mode. So, as I said, we found out about this agreement a week before the meeting.
Yeah. I want to pivot a little bit to a same general topic. These contracts were given to Attorney Jana Small, according to published reports, to look into. Do you know the status of that? Who's looking into it? What's going on there?
I was contacted by Attorney Jerry Farrell Sr. last week. He indicated to me that he was investigating it.
Is that didn't we understand it was Jana Small who was doing it?
That's what I got from the newspaper.
Yeah,
quite
okay.
frankly.
Yeah, and that would make sense, I think, because she was very close to it. Is there anything to read into the fact that it's been changed, or Attorney Farrell is looking into this, and not Attorney Small, or is that just innocuous fact, and it just is
I
what
think
it
it's,
is?
I'm a little, I know that Jerry Jr. has had a lot to do with the cemetery, and I think he was the president up until like 2011, 12, right about the time that this was going on. I'm doing my own thing, so they can do their investigation.
Ralph, I didn't mean to ignore you.
No, not at all. Except no, you didn't ignore me at all.
I didn't want to interrupt my thoughts, or else I would just lose.
You and Craig both have much more.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all. You and Craig have much more detailed knowledge of the issue, and.
But we got about maybe less than a minute left.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts so far? As to
no,
what
except that I'm waiting to see not only, I guess, what the mayor's review shows more than ever, but Craig also has his eyes on this, so we'll be reporting on the outcomes.
Craig, next steps that you anticipate?
I've done FOI requests on Mark Deptula, Building and Grounds.
You mean since this meeting?
Yes.
Okay. What did you ask for?
Anything having to do with either of those bid numbers, as well as any work done by Performance on behalf of the town. They're the same for all three individuals. Henry McCauley, Mark Deptula, and Sal Amadeo. Most of the other documents that I had gotten from the cemetery, I did an FOI request like a year ago. So.
Very, very quickly, how many documents did you review and you already had in your possession by this meeting? Because you had documents that you looked over, like a dozen or 5 dozen or
30 maybe.
Okay.
A lot of holes though.
We got to go.
Yeah, we got to go.
We got to go.
We're at 0.
Thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show.
Thank you.
We do appreciate your coming on, and good luck on on the new council. We wish you all well. Thank you for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We do appreciate that. We're here on Wednesdays. Watch WPAA Thursdays at 9, Fridays at 9, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday at 9. That's when the Citizen Mike Show is broadcast on WPAA or YouTube. Just search that, the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel, and you'll come across the Citizen Mike Show. Hey, if it's night at night, it's Citizen Mike. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.